I recently made a decision. You want to hear it? Here it goes. I decided that I'm too old to be engaged in much technology. I'm going to let the new technological things I'm going to ignore them all. And one of the things I'm going to ignore is AI. I don't understand it. I don't like it. I don't trust it. And I'm not going to worry about it. And so this comes to fruition for me in the car, because I used to have a GPS, and my GPS was fantastic. It was made by a company named Garmin, and it was programmable, and it used maps and satellites to help me figure out where I'm going and where I'm at. And it would tell me about traffic problems because it was using satellites and it was looking above. And I remember when I was a kid, or younger rather, and I was just starting out in ministry, I lived near Hartford, Connecticut, a major city there. And if I needed to drive in Hartford, I could turn on the radio, and then I would hear, once in a while, there'll be a radio break, and I would hear this. Traffic on 95 is backed up for 5 miles. You want to take an alternate. Now, it wasn't the guy doing that. It was or it was the guy in the studio doing that. I don't know. But anyway, I like the helicopter idea. Why? Because he was above looking down. And when I have to figure out why I'm in a long line, if I'm in traffic, I can't figure it out. Right? Because I can only see a few cars in front of me. But of course, the helicopter is above and looks down. Now, here's where AI comes in. When you get through Siri, if you have an iPhone, or through Android, if you have Google Maps, when you get traffic updates on your GPS, they're not using satellites. They're not using helicopters. You know what they're using? Other drivers. They're using other drivers, and the AI algorithm is seeing other drivers slow down at a certain place. And if enough of them slow down, it pops and says, hey, there's a traffic accident, or there's a blockage up ahead. Here's an alternate route. Here's my problem. I don't want somebody named Gus who's driving 10 miles an hour to give me an alternate route because the algorithm thinks Gus is in a traffic jam. You know what I mean? Gus is just sitting there Sunday driving, and I'm taking 3-mile detour because the algorithm says some guy named Gus is driving slow when he should be driving fast, so that means there's a traffic jam. I want this. I want a guy up there saying, yeah, there's a big thing here, we got to watch out, you want to take an off. I want that. That's what I want. I don't like AI. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because I like to travel with somebody telling me the view from above. I don't want people on the road telling me what they think is going to happen. And I don't want a computer with an algorithm telling me what I need to do in my car. I don't like that. If a real human's up there looking down on what's going on and can survey the entire landscape from above, I'll listen to them and I will act accordingly. Here's the problem. When you and I don't listen to information coming from above, our only option is to try to figure out our route on our own while we're stuck in traffic. I want to know the voice from above. What's the voice from above say? What's going on from a vantage point where they see everything? They can see it all and tell me, this is why you're going to back up here, so go around this way. I'm looking from above down at what's going on. I'm not horizontal and washing it through a computer with AI and coming up with an algorithm. Folks, when you and I follow God, we're listening to the voice above. And he's looking down because he can see it all right now. And when we follow his directions, we will go to the place he wants us to go when he wants us to be there. Otherwise, we have to figure it out all on our own. As we're working our way through Ecclesiastes, we're coming to near the end of our series. You only have today and in 2 more weeks. And as we look at Ecclesiastes, if you followed, you probably know that he talks a lot about death, the author. And it's probably Solomon. We think it's Solomon. Some scholars think it's not Solomon. I don't care. But anyway, he thinks, Solomon, that once we understand death, then we know how to live. We have to understand death before we can actually live correctly. And that's what God is teaching us through the book of Ecclesiastes, to live backward, to know that we're going to die, and then understand life now in the presence of this truth, that one day this life's going to be over, and most of what went on doesn't mean much. Because if we get that wrong, then we're trying to figure out why there's a traffic jam when we're 6 miles back in traffic waiting to go. What's going on up there? Why is this happening? Should we take an alternate route? Is it a temporary slowdown, or are we going to be here for hours? Is somebody hurt? Is somebody dying up there? Is there a family in turmoil up there? Was there a wreck that's just something, or is Gus traveling on I-95 again? Is that what's going on? Why are we slowed down? What are we to do? Should we get off here and take a different way? Folks, God told us that death is coming to us all, not to shroud us in depression. God told us that so we would live correctly now. And that's what the writer of Ecclesiastes is doing. We're not going to talk a lot about death anymore because he's kind of past that. What he's doing now is giving us practical advice. And this is one of the passages that tell the scholars that's probably Solomon, because the first part of chapter 11 reads a lot like any chapter in Proverbs. And it's kind of what they think. This is why we think this is probably Solomon, because he's writing very similarly as he does in the book of Proverbs. This is a practical passage. There's not a whole lot of theology here. It's just here's how you should live your life. Once we realize there are certain things that we will never know because we're not God, and once we realize we should stop trying to know them because we're not God, it changes the way we think about the things we can know and do know. One of the things that we pick up in this passage is we have to live with uncertainty. I don't like being uncertain. I don't like not knowing. One of the reasons why the internet is so popular and we can't imagine living without it is because we all like information. We all want to know what's going on. We want to know right now what's going on. Have you come to this idea that you don't listen to newscasts that you used to listen to growing up, and you don't read newspapers? Why? Because all the news you read or hear is old. You've already heard about the headlines. You read it on your news feed somewhere. And 6 hours later, they're reporting it like it just happened. I know, all right, that's old hat. Let's go on to something else. We like information, but information does not give us certainty. In fact, sometimes the more information we have, the more uncertain we become. But we have to learn to live with uncertainty. If you're going to live life under the sun, where nothing changes, know this. Along with that idea is great uncertainty, because we don't control things. God does. Here's what we have to understand. We, even with our advanced technology, we cannot predict the future. We don't have the ability to do that. Wouldn't you like to be able to predict the future? Wouldn't that be great? Do you have this dream that you already know who's going to win the Final Four? Because DraftKings and FanDuel are asking you to bet? If you already knew, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be great if you could speed up time, figure it out, and then come back and just bet all your money on it and just get tons of riches? Maybe I'm the only one with that dream. I'm sorry, just me. Anyway, but here's the thing. You and I don't want to predict the future so we can get rich. You and I want to predict the future. Why? Because we don't trust what's going to happen. And we want to make sure we're ready for anything. Well, living with uncertainty is how we walk on this earth. We have to live understanding we can't predict the future. Ecclesiastes puts it this way: divide your investments among many places. Why? Because you do not know what risks might lie ahead. Some people think, oh, he's giving good investment advice. You need to diversify. That's very a limited understanding of this, but it works. But really, the greater truth is, you and I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. You and I have no idea what's going to happen this afternoon. We certainly don't know what's going to happen years from now. The other thing we have to live with, the uncertainty, is that we cannot do that which only God can do. There are certain things we cannot control. There are certain things that we have no control over, no say over at all. We cannot do that which only God can do. We're told, just as you cannot understand the path of the wind or the mystery of a tiny baby growing in its mother's womb, so you cannot understand the activity of God who does all things. We have to live with the understanding that we can't figure everything out, that we can't understand everything as much as we would like to. There are some questions that are going to remain shrouded in mystery, and we are not going to be able to figure it out. So what do we do? Well, we cannot guarantee success and avoid failure. You and I have to live with that chance. What we're doing right now may be successful, or it may end in failure. A relationship we have right now may be successful, or it may end in failure. An idea we have right now may be successful, or it will end in failure. Some plan we devised for our finances, or for our relationships, or for anything else may work, and it may not. But living with uncertainty can be accomplished with faith in God. You know, humans don't like to live with uncertainty. That's why everybody wants to be rich. They want to be rich because they feel like if they can be rich, then they can control and engineer circumstances. And to a small degree, that might be true in some aspects of life. But in the larger aspects that we all are subject to, we cannot control or engineer them. We have to live with uncertainty. How? With faith in God. We come to a place that we're not certain, and what do? We can try an alternate route, or we can wait on God to mark out the path for us and follow that path. You and I have to be able to live with uncertainty by having a great faith in God, knowing that we don't know the answers, but God does. When the soldiers of Israel saw Goliath, they thought to themselves, he's so big, we'll never kill him. But when David saw Goliath, he thought to himself, he's so big, I cannot miss him with my slingshot. Why did David think a thought like that? He had faith in God. If you read the passage where this is found in the Old Testament, you'll see that David had great faith in God. He said, this is a Philistine. He's an enemy of God. There's no problem here, guys. There's no sweat. It's going to happen. Isn't that amazing? Living life with uncertainty is possible when we have faith in God. God's promises can be trusted. God's nature never changes. He doesn't change his mind on how much he loves you or if he loves you at all. That is a constant. More constant than anything that we can ever see or know. And then the writer says we can live with uncertainty, but you also, on a few things, you need to live with certainty. There are a few universal truths that remain, no matter if we believe them or not. We have to live with certainty. We live with the proper perspective. We have to keep our eyes on God and not on the problem. Show you a slide. There's a donut shop road sign advertisement that said, when a long life's journey you roll, keep your eye on the donut, not on the hole. I like that. That's straight from Reader's Digest, by the way. Anyway, I really like that, don't you? Folks, you can look at the positive or the negative in anything. When you're riding with God, understand this. It doesn't matter what your interpretation of the circumstances are. If God's in control, he's going to bring us through. If God's in control, he has a reason. Now, what is that reason? I don't know. We have to live with uncertainty, but we can be certain God knows. Here's one of the things God says that's a total reversal of human thought. We know that giving is more rewarding than getting. If you've ever done this, if you've ever experienced this, you know this to be a universal truth. You always receive more with what you give than what you get. Ecclesiastes 11 verse 1 says, send your grain across the seas, and in time profits will flow back to you. This is the same as the New Testament teaching, where it says, put others first and give and you will receive more. Give and you will never outgive God. This is a certain promise. Here's how this works. If you and I hold too tightly to the things of this world, if the things of this world are what raptures or thrills our soul, if the things of this world are what we're counting on to give us happiness and lasting peace, we won't give much away. But when we understand this world is expendable, that our deaths are certain, we can live life backward knowing the more we give, the more we receive. That is a promise from God. And it is wise to have a loose hold on everything in this life. Don't let things of this life become idols to you that you will not let go into your dying breath. That's wasted energy. Here's another truth we can live with certainty about. Neither success nor failure is permanent. I really like this. Neither success nor failure is permanent. Here's what we read. When clouds are heavy, the rain comes down sometimes. And whether a tree falls north or south, it stays where it falls. Clouds change. Sometimes it looks like rain and it doesn't rain. Sometimes it doesn't look like rain and it rains. If you live in the South, like I grew up in the South, you'll know that on a bright sunny day, it can rain. And you can't see the clouds, and you don't know where the rain is because you can see the sun. It's an amazing phenomenon they've never really figured out, but it's true. Sometimes clouds do what they're supposed to do, sometimes they don't. But a tree, when it falls, is going to stay right there unless somebody comes upon it. It's going to stay right there. There are some things that will change. And what happens when a tree falls? Well, when it falls and it's freshly fell, it's going to cause a hazard if you're walking in its path. But over years, it's going to become less and less. Why? Because it rots and goes away. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same in this life. Do any of you know the movie Rudy? It's about the guy who went to Notre Dame to play football, and there's only one problem. He couldn't play football. He wasn't very good. He wasn't very tall, wasn't very fast. But there's a movie about him called Rudy where he goes to Notre Dame and he tries his hardest and he gets in for a couple of plays on the very last game of the season where he's eligible to be in uniform for the team. There's a character in there that kind of looks out for Rudy. He's the caretaker. He's the custodian of the school. And he kind of gives Rudy a place to sleep and encourages him on his path there through Notre Dame. He's played by a guy named Charles Dutton. Charles Dutton is an African-American actor who died before his time of a serious heart ailment that was undiagnosed. What's amazing about Dutton's story, even though he died, I think, in his late 40s, early 50s, was that he was a prisoner. He was actually incarcerated and then got out and then went to Hollywood and landed a TV show called Rock and was in several movies. Probably his most notable role was of that in the movie Rudy. He was being interviewed by a reporter after his accolades, and they asked him, why did you not commit another crime when so many people who are released from prison end up back in prison? What kept you out? And Dutton thought for a minute, and his answer was very informative. He said, well, I think it was because, unlike other prisoners, I never decorated my cell. In other words, I never made prison my home. I was always thinking about life after prison. Many of us live in a prison. When we think this world is going to bring us all the hopes and happiness we can get, when we think we're going to be fulfilled by everything in this world, and we look upon things that don't fulfill us as negative and wasted, we don't understand that this life is not reality. This is a life before the real life begins. This place is not our home. So why decorate the cell? Do you think once you get out of this life, you're going to want to come back in it? Not if everything we read about heaven is true, and I believe it is. You're not going to want to do that. Here's what happens when we get to decorating ourselves, when we get at home in this life. We want everything to go right, no mistakes, because we wrongly believe this is our only chance at happiness. So we overanalyze everything and try to get everything just perfect. But waiting for the perfect opportunity to move forward is wasting time. Another adage that we get from, I think, Solomon here, who wrote this, sounds like a proverb. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they will never harvest. We have to understand in this life, perfect will never show up except in the Son of God. That's it. There'll be no circumstances where it's perfect. There'll be no situation where you can't do anything but succeed. Everything is uncertain to some degree, except what we know for sure. And one of the things we know for sure is that waiting for perfection is wasted time, because it won't show up here. Well, what do? We live with uncertainty. We have to live with certainty. Well, what do? Well, regardless, we have to live. We have to live regardless if we're certain or uncertain of what's going to happen to us. No one likes that. No one wants to think, well, my future isn't going to be bright. We all want this idea that the future is just going to get better and better. Well, regardless of if it will or not, we have to live. In verse 6, we read, plant your seed in the morning and keep busy all afternoon in the garden, as it were. For you don't know if profit will come from one activity or another, or maybe both. What he's telling us here is we have to be busy and resist the urge to figure God out. Resist the urge to try to figure God and his plan out. Resist that. If you're going to sit and say, God, I'm not going to move until I know exactly what you're going to do, and I want you to tell me how everything's going to go before I do anything, God's not going to do that. If you say, God, I'm going to move, and as I move, I need you to direct me, God will do that. We have to stop demanding that God reveal the details of his plans for you. Saw a quote, someone that once said, anybody who still thinks the sky is the limit has no imagination. If you think all that you can think or divine for this life is all there is, you don't understand your Father in heaven. You don't understand that you're going to look back on things of this life that you thought were important, and one day you're either going to hit your forehead in disgust or you're going to laugh at how silly it was because of your limited vision right now. What are we to do? Well, we are to do what God has made you able to do, and no more than that. God's not asking you to control other people or the circumstances. God's asking you to do what he's asked you to do this moment. And you don't have to worry about trying to fix everything else. Fix this issue with these people over here. Make these people start behaving like they should be over here. Make that situation turn out like it should be, fair in your mind, just in your mind over there. You can't control all these things. God is in control. You have to keep in balance the fact that there are some things you can control he's asked you to do. You can control what you do in the morning. If you will plant and if you'll work in the afternoon, you can control that. But you can't control the outcomes of almost anything else. We have to stay busy doing what God's asked us to do as long as we can. We do what we're supposed to do, and we leave everything else to God. Once you're doing what you're supposed to do, then you leave the results to God. We try, but we can't actively engineer outcomes. God is in control. We are along for the ride in a lot of these situations. I don't know about you, but that gives me hope. On days like today when I wake up and it's dreary and rainy and I'm just not feeling it, that gives me hope. Well, God, I know you're feeling it. I know it's okay with you. Could you transfer some of that to me? Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. But what am I to do? What are you to do? You and I keep doing what we're supposed to do and let God handle the results. It's when we put ourselves in God's place and say, well, I'm not going to do this unless I know for sure. Well, you got to stop right there. Only God knows for sure. God, if this is a step you have in front of me, I will take it. And after I take that step, I'll take the next one you reveal. And I'll leave the end point, I'll leave the results, I'll leave the engineering of the circumstances to you. I'll be obedient in this step. We'll take this with you this morning. This whole message can be summed up with this idea. Don't put God in a box based on your limited perspective. Because God loves to blow up boxes. And he will. Don't say, God, you have to do, God, you let God be God and let you be you. And based on your limited perspective, understand that God is in control and that you can trust him. He tells us in Isaiah, for just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. Who are you going to trust? Who are you going to leave your peace with? Your own ability to find your way through what could be a traffic jam? Or you're going to trust the voice from above that sees it all and knows exactly what's going on? If we procrastinate because of circumstances, we won't accomplish anything. We have to keep walking the next step. Some of us like to procrastinate because it keeps us from making decisions we don't want to make or doing things we don't really want to do. We've all found that when you do this, bad things happen. Sometimes we suffer what's called analysis paralysis when we excessively overthink a decision. I've done this. 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 So many times. And then I make a boneheaded move, thinking I know all the angles when I really didn't know them at all. And I wasted a lot of anxious time trying to work through something. This occurs when someone becomes overwhelmed by the potential consequences of their choices and is unable to move forward. I don't want to, folks, can I tell you something? Sometimes walking with God, there's fear attached to it, but that fear doesn't stymie our faith. It's not wrong to take a step with God and still be concerned that it's the right step. That's called human. It's wrong to take a step based on your own thoughts and what you want to do and ignore God. But by building our faith and trusting God, we can accomplish all that is necessary. By living in faith and trust now, we'll accomplish all that is necessary. This is how we live life under the sun. How many of you know what last week was? Anybody? It was opening day of the baseball season. Did anybody know that? The Rays won Friday. I don't want to talk about yesterday, but they won Friday. They're going to play again today. It was opening day of baseball. Remind me of Reggie Jackson. You may not know who that is. Reggie Jackson was a ball player back in the 70s and 80s with the Yankees and the Baltimore Orioles, I think. And he was great. He was coined Mr. October because that's when the playoffs started. And Reggie Jackson, year to year, when he was in the playoffs, his game actually stepped up. He was Mr. October. He said in an interview, I really didn't know how to play baseball until after September 30th. Then all of a sudden, I became a great baseball player. But here's what most people don't know. As well as he performed in October for the playoffs, and he won championships, he lived for the postseason because that's where he was shined. But he did say, I also had to shine in the regular season. And they said, well, how did you get yourself up to shine from April all the way through September? And he said, October. I knew October was coming. I was preparing myself the whole year to shine in October. That's why I'm known in baseball as Mr. October. Well, God is looking for some Mr. and Mrs. Octobers this morning. God is looking for people with their eyes on eternity who faithfully play the regular season because they're looking forward to the postseason. you and I live backward by understanding that what's going on in the future, we take that and turn around and look back at what's going on now, and we act accordingly. Like Jackson, who knew October was coming, he prepared himself April, May, June, July, and August, and September for it. That's what you and I are doing right now. Living life backward, living with uncertainty, living with certainty, and regardless of either, living. Father in heaven, we ask that you would allow us to live with certainty. Father, if there's someone here today who doesn't know you and have a personal relationship with you, will they understand that this is available to them, and will you speak to their hearts right now? Father, for those of us who know you and are living a life, Father, perhaps we're in good circumstances, perhaps we're in bad circumstances, let us remember that no matter what it is, it's temporary and not permanent, and that one day we will live with you forever. Let us walk in faith, believing that you are in control of whatever happens. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.